welcome back again. I hope you enjoyed the workshops of this morning and just after lunch break. I think it's really exciting to actually be able to sit together again on some tables and discuss things in real life. Gives me way more energy than just staring for the two screens all day. On the other side, I also hope that on the online side everybody was able to follow as well. So for the rest of the day we have one more presentation before we head to the Operator Awards. For this presentation, Vivi will tell us a bit about how they actually bring the MyData operators into practice with the city of Helsinki. So Vivi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Koen, and hello. It is indeed an absolute delight to be in the same room with all you wonderful folks, and hello everyone online as well. My name is Vivi Lähteenoja. I'm a special advisor for data policy at the city of Helsinki. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some work in progress that's happening with the city of Helsinki in turning the MyData Declaration, including the operator model, into implementation. So before I get started on the actual implementation, I just wanted to say a couple of words about why Helsinki is involved in MyData and what we've done so far. So the same year that the declaration came out, 1917, the city of Helsinki signed it. In 2019, our digital program included the policy that residents of the city can influence how the data collected about them is used. Last year, in 2020, we published a data strategy that includes a commitment to the MyData principles. And just this year, we have officially joined MyData Global as a member organization. And throughout the years, and now especially, there are a number of projects and pilots and experiments putting these commitments into action. And I'm going to be talking you through some of the things that are happening. Now, what I'm about to talk to you about is from a work in progress paper that we're writing with the Chief Digital Officer for the City of Helsinki, Mikko Rusama, Mika Huhtamäki, Deputy CEO of Vastuu Group, and myself. And what I'm about to tell you is really like a sneak preview of what's in the full publication itself. So keep your eyes and ears out for the release later this year. So what we start with in this paper is really the description of the two paradigm shifts that we as the city of Helsinki are committed to making happen. The first is from the shift from a reactive to a proactive mode of operation. We want to be the kind of...
Recording in progress.
Thank you. So we want to be the kind of city that's there, that's what you need, when you need it, where you need it, without you necessarily having to go through a process of asking and finding out and requesting. We want to make the lives of our residents, our visitors, as easy and simple as possible. And the other shift that we firmly believe in and are working towards realizing is in terms of data, from outright exploitation to the human-centric use of personal data, which is obviously what MyData is all about and why we're all here as well. So one of the things that we cover in in what we're writing about are some of the challenges for data processing, specifically in cities. I won't go through these in details, but any one of you who's worked with the public sector or the municipal local governments will recognize these, I'm sure. So there are issues of data that is very siloed, even within one unit of the city organization. There are a number of legacy systems of different degrees of legacy, if you will. The permission management around a vast organization like a city can be incredibly fragmented. When there is the need to share data between different organizations or different organizational units, there are special challenges with that. There's obviously a very high need for transparency as a public organization, for how and what personal data we use. And there is a certain amount of regulatory uncertainty, especially as a public sector organization. We deal with a lot of specialized national legislation in addition to, for example, the EU GDPR. And all of it is being applied and interpreted differently and developed also as we speak. But this is what I wanted to spend a little bit more time on. Some of the opportunities that we've identified for proactive human-centric services for residents. I'll give you a quick description of each of these, and there will be detail on the kind of data types that we're using, the legal basis we're using for processing, what are the identification methods, and the other kind of like nitty-gritty details of these use cases. But the one that I want to start with is preventative healthcare. So the City of Helsinki has developed something called the Health Benefit Analysis Tool, which is a tool that analyzes patients' healthcare data and applies a set of good practice rules and over 300 criteria in order to recommend appropriate treatment. So all of this data is pseudonymized. It's derived from existing health records, and it gives medical professionals this kind of an overview of a patient's test results, previous diagnoses, sort of a picture of their health and history without disclosing their identity, right? And this data is used to highlight these kind of care gaps that inadvertently do occur in healthcare, where a patient is not receiving the treatment that they should be getting based on their kind of situation and history. High-risk patients are prioritized using this tool, and sort of based on their need for intervention, and they're invited to discuss their health issues with their doctor, where this pseudonymized patient ID is used to identify them then back in the health records. So this is one of the kind of tools and initiatives that we are developing right now and working with. The second example I wanted to share is an automated qualification check. So this is from a completely different world of things, really. But the city construction services, they provide services in construction, environmental management, logistics, and stuff. And in order to operate some of the vehicles that are city-owned, the employees naturally need a certain kind of qualification, certain kind of permits. And currently, how the employees kind of prove that, yes, I have a valid driver's license with qualifications X, Y, and Z, is that they physically visit their supervisor to show their driver's license. And the supervisor confirms the validity in this kind of face-to-face meeting. So what we've done with the city construction services is we've developed a kind of digital booking calendar for each vehicle, where when you are booking a vehicle as an employee who is going to drive that or operate it, the validity of the employee's driver's license and permits is automatically verified from the national agency responsible for maintaining these records. And this has been a pretty cool case in the sense that we're not just using, like in the sort of healthcare example, we were using the data from kind of one unit within the city of Helsinki. Over here, what we're doing is we're actually looking into a national agency's data registry and making use of that for our city employees as well. And that's been a really, really interesting and fruitful process as well to find out how that can work. And the third point or example I wanted to give was the streamlined process to qualify for subsidized daycare, which was something that we're working on, what we're in the initial stages of right now. So in Finland, daycare services are in large part organized by cities and municipal governments, and they require the parents or guardians to pay fees to pay for daycare. But according to Finnish law, your level of income as a family affects these fees. So some categories are eligible for subsidies, right? And currently, information on this family income has to be submitted by filling out a form and then proving documentation either by paper in the mail or through secure email as PDFs to the customer fee unit of the city, right? And in 2019, over 26,000 children attended Helsinki's daycare services, so that's quite a lot of PDFs to go through, right? So what we're working on right now is a way for the guardian of a child to authorize the city to verify their family income from the National Tax Authority records. And this would eliminate the need for this elaborate process for providing and then checking proof. We could then automate the verification process and proactively offer kind of subsidized fees without even an application from the guardian themselves. So this is kind of another example of trying to kind of make the lives of parents with small children who probably have a lot of things on their plates just a little bit easier. The next part I'm going to go through really, really quickly. So what we do in our working paper, we're just describing some of the kind of operating environment in which we are. So there's a description of the regulatory landscape. Like I mentioned, there's the GDPR, but there's also a lot of national legislation in Finland that's specific to municipalities or specific to kind of sectors like healthcare and so on. We go through some of the roles in the data and identity ecosystem just to position us as a city within that. We describe some business realities of data sharing sort of with and within the public sector. And we also go through some ethical and societal considerations of the kind of data use and sharing that we're talking about here. But then the actual implementation of how we're making these things happen, we don't have a definitive illustration as of yet. So there are many ways to kind of conceptualize how the different parts of what we're doing relate to each other. So what I thought I'd do is actually use the reference model from the Understanding MyData Operators white paper, which describes the functional elements of a MyData operator. And the implementation at Helsinki is in some ways related to all but value exchange and data model management as of now. So there are elements of identity management, elements of permission management, elements of service management, as well as personal data transfer and store elements. So in the identity management space, we have a centralized authentication service, which aggregates different identity providers and provides one single point of entry to all city services. So you can, for example, log in with a social media credentials and only kind of do a strong identification if it's required by the service that you're interacting with. We are integrated with the national identity provider Suomi.fi for that, for strong authentication. And then a sort of in the identity management itself, a generated contextual identifier key, or what we're calling a Helsinki ID, is created when you're first logging into this portal. And it's used across all the integrated services for their kind of individual service profiles. And the portal also then sort of shows you what social media accounts you may have logged in with or connected with this Helsinki ID, with the option to always remove them. And we are trying, or like the principle with this is that we are using this like Helsinki ID as the citywide kind of identifier instead of something like a social security number, which is so kind of like one of the principles for how we are building the identity system around this. In the second box, permission management. So we're talking mostly about consent at this stage in terms of the GDPR basis for legal processing, but we're also looking to include data here on which other legal bases data is being used, so you have visibility into that as well. But this kind of dashboard idea of permission management is where you can see all the city services that are currently using data about you, and the basis on which they do so. And sorry. Another feature of kind of permission management that we have implemented so far is delegated permission. So kind of conducting your business with the City of Helsinki on behalf of another person or on behalf of a legal entity. So there are kind of obviously companies and organizations based in Helsinki who also need to interact with the city. So as part of our kind of permission management whole, we've also developed ways in which permission can be delegated from a company to a person who can then be authenticated. On the third block, which is service management, this is also, I mean, it's included in what I mentioned before. It's kind of like this dashboard of all these services that are using your data, but it also contains transaction information and an audit trail from the services that you do use. So there's an element of kind of logging and accountability baked in here. Eventually, we're looking to enable the inclusion of third-party services into the portal, and we've developed this component, which has also been open sourced, called Access Gateway, and we're developing and helping develop this minimum interoperability mechanism for MIM4 with open and agile smart cities, which enables third-party services to interoperate with the services at the City of Helsinki provides. And we're also building in messaging functionality with this implementation. So through the one-stop kind of identification route, you can also like conduct your business with the different services that you are using with the City of Helsinki. Then on the personal data transfer side, we're also building the kind of technical means of transferring data between a person's personal data storage, which I'll come to next, and the registers of city services. And like the previous point, we're also looking to enable transfer of data between the personal data storage and third-party applications eventually as well. And in some cases, it might become necessary for a person to make data requests of kind of the various different departments of the city itself, and request them for reuse in another service. So this kind of data request management is something that we're looking into as well. And then finally, on the data storage side, we're looking into a kind of private data storage for each person, which would, for example, host these the kind of results of data requests that a person can make through the portal. And it would also contain this kind of core personal data register, which is separate from because all the different services the city uses require slightly different sets of data, but they all have some common elements, right? So most of them will need to know your name or your address and things like this. So there's also kind of like what we're building is a core register for the person, which gets some of its data from the National Population Registry Center, and some which you can provide for yourself for that. So if you, for example, want to be contacted primarily through email, you can, enter your email as a primary communication channel, or if you'd rather get an SMS message, then you can enter your phone number there. And these are details that you can obviously edit at all times. So in conclusion, this is a lot of stuff that we're doing right now. It's part of a number of different projects, a number of different pilots that are in different phases. But we are seeing this kind of MyData implementation really emerge and start to take shape, and we are really appreciating the fact that the devil really is in the details when we're looking into these things. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of detail in the paper itself on exactly how we are doing each one of these things. So look forward to reading the full paper as soon as it comes out very soon. So that's me. Thank you very much. Okay. Any questions? Sarah?
Yeah, so these actually tools, are they available for citizens?
Can you repeat the question as well so that they
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Recording stopped.
So the tools are already available, right?
Some of them are in production, and some are being piloted, and some are being kind of proof of concept. So these are very different levels of implementation right now.
Okay, so I think my question is related to what we discussed this morning. Is the city providing these services to citizens? So what does it mean in terms of business models for city? Is the city paying? Who's paying?
The city is paying, yes.
And is considering to
So it's the strategic objectives of the city are to digitize as much of its service provision as possible. So that's a commitment in the very, very fresh city strategy that just came out about a month ago. And we're also kind of in our data strategy, we're committed to providing the best kind of services we can according to the MyData principles to our citizens. So this is a strong mandate from our leadership to do this. And then there was Will.
Do you mind if I ask my question? Pass the mic.
All right, sure.
I've hijacked the mic. Hi, it's Eric. To follow up on Sarah's question, I wanted to know if you would measure the ROI, the return on investment, not just in terms of money, financial returns, but also added services, satisfaction of the citizen, etc., because this could be quite interesting to build the case further. So the question is, do you do it? Do you plan to do it?
That's not in operation right now, but there is, especially when it comes to some of the key objectives of the new city strategy, which include this streamlining and providing of better digital services, that will be measured absolutely over this next kind of political term. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I have it. So. You often mentioned we implement this and we implement that. So who's actually, or how's the role distribution between the city of Helsinki, and are there also other, let's say, private parties involved? For example, I saw in the white paper also Vasto Group. So are there private companies involved that build components, or is the public-private collaboration, or is it just, in the end the components are provided by the city of Helsinki?
So this is a public-private collaboration in that there are a number of public-private collaborations involved, right? So there are projects, one in which Vasto Group is involved, hence Mika also contributing to this paper. But sort of the terms of agreement with our partners, especially in this case with the open sourcing of the access gateway, was that we require as a city of Helsinki that these components be made open source by our commercial partners. Within the city as well, like this is depending on kind of the stage of where of how mature this work is. The division of labor differs, right? So very kind of stuff that goes fully into production and is there available, that's kind of city provided. But then in the earlier stages, especially, we do a lot of collaboration also with private companies.
I have a question online. There's also a lot of appreciation for your presentation, but Dixon has a question saying that he's interested to know if the city of Helsinki prefers open sourced over closed bind-in platforms.
I would say yes, we prefer open source. Yes. Okay, we'll close there. So thank you very much, everyone.
It really does feel like a TV show where we have the countdown for this session, which is probably the most celebratory session of today, and also even the whole Amsterdam community meeting. As you see from the slide, my name is Silla Sepp. I'm the programs lead at MyData Global, and I have the pleasure to host the whole session today and congratulate the awardees of MyData Operator 2021 today. In this 90-minute session, actually, that we have today, we don't only announce the awardees, but we will also have the chance to hear from the city of Amsterdam what are their thoughts about development in the city and what kind of city they would like to be. We will also get to know operator services much better. We have 3 different operator services from 3 different continents joining us today, and also hear further insights about what have we learned in the recent months and year from engaging and working together with operator services. But before we go into all of these different sections, I think it's also important and would serve us as a wider community to take a step back and just make sure that everybody is on the same page and understand what we mean by MyData operators when we talk about MyData operators, and also how do they foster the human-centric approach to personal data. So really starting from the MyData concept, hopefully everyone joining in today here on site or online know already the general MyData concept and the basic idea of individuals having more control over their data, and really also having meaningful ways how to benefit from their data. Having control can manifest itself in many different ways, but essentially that means that us as people have more possibilities to access data about ourselves, use it, reshare it to other stakeholders, correct it if need be, and really just benefit from that to live better lives. And in this way, when we start to make this human-centric approach to personal data happen, we start to move towards a more fair, more sustainable, and more prosperous digital society. In this context, people get value from their data and set the agenda on how it is used, and at the same time, for organizations, using data ethically is the most attractive option on the market, so it's already given to use it in that manner. But in order to get to that, we need to also take collectively some few but really important steps. A few of them have been also mentioned throughout the Amsterdam community meeting already, and really the starting point is to providing more actionable means how to get access to data, how to use it, how to share it further and benefit from that. To start providing individuals really better services that truly benefit and empower them to use that data even. And finally, building and developing those services in a way that it's for open ecosystems rather than closed ones, in order to avoid that value creation is really possible only for one or few selected service providers. These are great, very big steps to take, and the question is how. Surely there's a need for commonly used standards that really show how things should be developed. It's needed that there's good governance in order to ensure trust in the service providers as well as the ecosystem in general, and infrastructure where all of this should happen, the tools, the environment where we move data around. And here is where MyData operators come to play. Operators essentially are those service providers who provide individuals ways how to securely access data, integrate it, share it to others, and so forth. So these operators provide that infrastructure for both organizations but also individuals to manage data about themselves. And you see already this image that have also been mentioned many times throughout the day, that this is a network of different types of organizations with different roles of the having of data source, data using service, and operator. So this infrastructure also gives the means to control the flows of data from one entity to another, not only accessing data within organizations. Operators are nothing new or invented by MyData Global. They have been emerging from the market for many, many years, as we learned also from Koen's presentation earlier today. And these have been mentioned or described with different names in the past, like personal information management systems, data trusts, information banks, and the likes. But what they all essentially are, and what they do is facilitating data flows as a trusted intermediary, and that is important to keep in mind, and that's how we call them MyData operators. What we've learned throughout the years, though, is that operators are still also very different. How do they provide their services? But the operator thematic group has defined some core elements, some core functional elements that all of the operator services deploy and implement and offer one way or another. And not all operator services cover all of those functional elements. They might have a selection of those, but all of them have something included. If you'd like to learn more of what those all functional elements entail, then I recommend and encourage you to go to the MyData Operators website, download the white paper there, and dive into some more details about those. What is important to remember, though, is that operator services still operate, they work in an ecosystem with other organizations. And those organizations need to provide their services in an interoperable way in order to really win from those data flows. And that is a huge, huge task. This interoperability is already important from this third shift that I mentioned, from going from closed to open ecosystems. But because it's so tricky, MyData Global is also engaging with service providers to start moving towards it. We call it as a journey towards interoperability. And this is really what actually MyData Operator 2020 Award is all about. Engaging with those service providers to really understand how do they do provide their services, how do they do it in practice, and at the same time recognizing them, celebrating them, that's really showing the great work that they're doing in the actual market for putting this human-centric approach to personal data, making it bringing it to life. So this is where I end for the starting point. You will get the chance to learn more from those three operator services, and as well as the operator landscape a little bit more in detail later on during the session. But for now, I will actually welcome on stage Geert Baron from the city of Amsterdam. He's the Chief Technology Officer in the city, been responsible for the innovation of the city, the R&D, different partnerships. And what Geert mentioned when we talked before the session, then mentioned that's really, for the city of Amsterdam, individual data rights, the values are really, really important, and they are asking in the city of really what kind of city do we want to be, and I think we have a chance to hear it right away, how it's going to look like in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the introduction. And thanks for the invitation to say a few words, basically. I always think when it's, because I really like your presentation about the whole idea, but for me as civil service in the city of Amsterdam, actually it's, I would say, a bit bigger. I mean, data is a thing in a bigger city. Obviously it's getting more and more important, but this discussion about who owns the data, who manages the data, what's the ecosystem, and can a user, consumer, but for us a citizen, can be the owner or, of its own data. And so I will start a bit, talk about a bit of narrative we're seeing this in for 2 minutes, but I think for us it's important that we don't see this as a, separate thing or something that's new, but I mean we should destruct a whole system basically that we created around the Industrial Revolution about centralizing all types of stuff, etc. So, I should stand over here, I didn't got instructions. And when I want to do the dance and everything here. No, so a bit of context. For us, when we talk about data, because this is a data conference, not a data conference, I just understood, so that says something as well. I mean, it's part of a bigger development. For us, when we talk about personal data and individual data and managing data and how to cope with data, it starts actually, I mean, at the idea of the 1600s. I mean, down in Amsterdam started to gather data from individuals, from travel routes, etc., and this made us the richest city in the world at a certain point of time. So collecting data was at the key, basically, in our success in the 1600s. In a square by 200 meters, Dam Square, we gathered all the data of all the routes around the world, gathering data from logs, from individuals, etc. So on our DNA in trade, etc., is this gathering data. And, throughout the century, I mean, we developed our city around this trade and everything, so it has a big impact. Your economy, data economy, has a tremendous impact also on the physical city. So for us, it's not only about the digital world, there's a one-to-one connection to the physical world. And, in Industrial Revolution, we started to create stuff like this, but starting at the, let's say, Digital Revolution and the internet for the last 3-4 decades, we came from an industrial point of view where everybody gathered data and centralized data, and we created big organizations, economically strong, but based on getting all the knowledge in a certain organization. We had IP, we started to collect data on individuals, we started to make data something that was even more important than in the 1600s. So the whole industry around this, and what we saw by the start of the internet, and every internet evangelist at the beginning started, this is a good thing because now data is democratized, everybody has access, and the whole world will be happy and shiny because now we don't have this big institutions owning, managing data and knowledge anymore. So for me, this discussion about my data is also about how can we get rid of these big institutes that actually have been growing for the last years. I mean, all these big techs do the same thing as in the Industrial Revolution. They say that they're decentralized, but in the end they're not, because they're centralizing the knowledge, the data, putting even more IP on it, and gather as much data as possible. And the business model is even data. And this is different than 200 years ago, because then products were the business model, but now data is the business model in itself. So when we really want to talk about these things seriously, we should also redefine what's our economy, what's the type of city, in our case, you want to be. Do you want to be a city with companies that actually own data? Because when you don't get rid of that, all the things we discussed today and on events like this, which I foster and I'm a big fan, or in the sideline, because we need to break down the other business models as well. Otherwise, I'm convinced this will be keeping a niche. So we need to work together also on the creative destruction of existing business models, I would say. So this is an introduction. For us, this is important. And for us also, what has changed when I talk about this new type of cities, this is an industrial type of city. And when you start to think about what does the new digital economy and the data economy does to us, it's a tremendous opportunity when we do this right, because you could start to change your city basically. You can put example given in, get rid of the traditional industry. So creative destruction is quite hard, because we managed to get cars in 10 years, and we got rid of them in 30 or 40 years. We got Shell out in the Netherlands, that's a good thing probably, but it took us quite a while as well. So redesigning your city basically in a physical sense, I think it's very comparable to the data point of view basically, because when we want to go to shared mobility and more efficient mobility, etc., we need to get rid of traditional models and traditional trade models. But to do this, you need to exchange data with all these new platforms as well. So for the new economy that we see popping up, we need to make a few design questions. And these design questions are, I think, based on, probably 5 times earlier today, this picture. But when you see that this is happening to the internet, this is also happening to every industry, isn't it? So energy sector used to be an energy plant popping down energy to your dishwasher. Nowadays we have distributed energy networks based on data, based on the individual who can, well, actually we could start our own energy company today. We could put solar panels on our roof. We could gather a lot of data of ourselves together when we have our own energy company. So this is happening to everything. So also to the governments. I mean, but not a single government has taken this step because we still centralized organizations with the mayor controlling the whole stuff and then trickling down. But in the end, this is happening to us. So in the end, when we could start an energy company, hey, why can't we start a government? Well, in essence, the government has the data and controls the data, so it's hard for us to start our own healthcare insurance company. It's hard for you to start your own government, because I would say a lot of tasks could be, like energy companies, could be distributed in a network as well. So when we really want to disrupt society, we need to tackle the whole thing. How can we make sure I really control my data and not a bit of it or just for fun things or just for... So for us, this discussion about make sure citizens own their data, have access to the data, share whatever they want to. It's actually about a bit about creating destruction of economy, industry, energy sector, but also about the government, because the current government, don't quote me in any magazines on this, but the current government obviously is bankrupt as well in that perspective. So we need to redefine the government as well. So this discussion for me is not about data or data, whatever, but it's about how can we create a new governance, a new government, and a new way we organize ourselves in industries and society. So it's a rather big discussion, I think, from my point. And then we have all types of nice projects to demonstrate, but I think it's a bigger discussion for us as well. And this whole idea that we change as a government as well, we can do this. I mean, we have every 4 years we have elections, so we want to do this secondly and fast, but our real feedback is every 4 years in elections and politics. So I would say the gathering of data and use of data has a big impact on everything we do, and the whole idea that we bring the control back to citizens, because we rather talk about citizens from a city perspective, but individuals, people, whatever, is for us quite important. So the city we want to be, as Amsterdam, is not a city that's facilitating data gathering around the city. It's not facilitating data economy in that perspective, but obviously we want to facilitate new initiatives that actually disrupt or break down traditional industries. So very practical, I mean, we defined a agenda within the last years. In 2019, we do have a smart city program, but we defined a digital agenda which was based on the idea, what's the city you want to be? You want to be a city where people can move in the digital world, can move around freely, safely, inclusive. So how can we avoid discrimination? How can we avoid that people's data is being stolen the whole time they work in the public space? And how can we make sure democracy is being taken care of as well? And how do we avoid discrimination? Because obviously the whole idea you see, making use of algorithms which are by default discriminating basically. How do you cope with this as well? So for us, the main question is, what's the type of city you want to be? And part of his answer is not a city that manages all your data and owns all the data, not a city that allows company to gather data in the public space without you knowing it. So we try to do a whole bunch of projects around it. So once upon a time, basically, I mean, we registered data from citizens, and then we got all this information. We got a passport, which is an interesting concept. I always try to explain my kids who are 4 and 6 that to prove who they are, they need a paper, basically, which is interesting. And so, hey, I'm me. No, you're not. And then you need a paper to prove who you are. This is an interesting concept. I mean, that the government decides who you are. We actually sell for €70.50. We sell a document stating that you're still alive. Interesting, huh? So you need to personally get it, actually. So it's, well, nobody really gets these things, I would say. So this is what we are registering. But when you want to apply for welfare in our city, you need to fill out 48 fields with all types of data. Again and again, in the Netherlands there are 1,300 databases having, before COVID, probably it's no way more actually, 1,300 databases where name and your government number, burger service number, are combined together, basically. So we gather all the data in every place, basically. And the only way to get rid of this, basically, is to make sure we get one place, you gather this, it's controlled by yourself. So this is not something extra, this is not place 1,301, I would say, but it should be all the 1,300 government type of organizations should go to that certain point. And then the internet comes in, basically, so we now have digital proof as well. DigiD is the main in the Netherlands, where we could digitally say who we are, but still state it with all the information that's collected in the register we have, BAP named, basically. So, so when you start to think about this, how can we make sure we start to make the relevant data, use the relevant data for certain purposes? Once you start to think about this, so this is not even a solution, and we end up The next slide will be about IRMA, as most people know, basically as a project. But this whole discussion of how can you make sure you share the relevant information at the proper time is interesting. But if this is still behind, it's quite a bit. So we started to work with the whole idea, around EID basically, and the law around digital government. Started to work on a program that actually was talking about data minimization, privacy by design, be transparent, well, all the things you put in your slides as well. So we thought we need to do something around these things. And then the interesting question that popped up, which I think is interesting as well, is once you can share a bit of information, such as with the IRMA project. Does everyone know the IRMA project? Most people know? Well, it's about you just upload basically your passport to your smartphone, and you share the relevant information from your passport that's necessary at that moment. So when people only need your name, you only verify your name. So you don't share your birth date, you don't share your sex or whatever. So you only share the relevant information. My big problem with this is, maybe you're in this as well, once you start to think about this, it's getting easier to share a bit of data. So the effect can be that you only share relevant information in a relevant moment. But I think we saw it, that actually everybody wants a bit of information all the time. And the big risk nowadays, we make it easier to share a bit of information. So showing your passport is quite a big thing, so you don't do that the whole time. Telling who you are is quite easy. But now we have, just share only your name from your passport to verify who you are, or your age, or your sex, or your place of living, a place of birth, whatever. So the interesting thing is we make it easier to share a bit of data, and now we're asking the whole time to share a bit of data. So the transactions in terms of data actually are increasing. So we thought we're doing something very privacy aware, making it only easier to share a bit of data, which is true, and I'm still a big fan of this thinking. But the effect is also that people think, well, asking for a passport is a bit of a big step. Let's ask for a bit of data. So just say who you are. And the whole idea of trust, that you state, I am who I am, and you just trust somebody, I'm Ger. Nobody asks me if I'm really Ger. I could be a random chubby guy walking around over here if you are talking about it, isn't it? But I'm not, I'm Ger. But nobody asked for my passport, and that's a big step. But a step away is, can you please verify a bit of your data, so your transactions actually will increase. So the whole idea about privacy by design, fan of it, but we really should think about what's the effect. And during Corona, we saw that now it's normal that one citizen asks another citizen, hey, could you please verify that you're had your vaccine? Oh, you're vaccinated. Just one civilian asking to another civilian. Well, big step, isn't it? We wouldn't have done that when you get the whole passport included as well, but it's only a bit of data. Now, let's ask for this little thing. But obviously, I would say this is a slope where you don't want to go on to, because one citizen controlling another citizen on these things, basically, next step, what will be the next step? I mean, well, I am chubby, I told it already, but it's relevant when you go to the McDonald's as well. But to do this, to make this for the better, actually, you start to talk to citizens who actually are very interested in thinking about what do I want to share, what I don't want to share. And everybody starts at the beginning, I want to share everything, and then at the beginning you end with only a name, probably. Yeah? Everybody knows these things when you really start to discuss what does it mean when you start to share stuff, and whom. But they all want to be in control, actually. So from kids to elderly people, and a lot of pilots about how can we use this idea of sharing a bit of data when you want to vote in your neighborhood for, well, the best playground or whatever. You only need to know somebody lives in this neighborhood, not age, not sex, not address. When you want to go to a bar, you only want to know somebody's 18, can have alcohol, yes or no. You don't need a name, etc. So we did a whole bunch of these interviews, small experiments, proof of concepts, and actually this worked quite well. And as I said, the only thing is that I'm afraid of that we now start to make it normal to ask for a bit of data from somebody, because just a bit of data. Just want to know if you're vaccinated, yes or no. Just want to know if you're 18, yes or no, because I don't believe you. So I'm just curious, I don't have a clue. We're going to do research about it, but what does it do with trust? So I talked with Uva last week, basically, to start some research about it. What does it do with trust? Because you don't trust anybody anymore, we just always want to check if somebody has a data, etc. So it's an interesting question for us, journey as well. Still, we need to do this. So we ended up with, together with the IRMA team, basically about creating a new UX. Lots of discussions, and we plan to pilot next year quite a bit further, and actually going to use this for our digital democracy, etc. So I'm collecting and gathering your own data. We also started mijnamsterdam.nl, where we give insight to all Amsterdammers which data we collect for them, and the next step will be for what purpose, because most of the time we really don't know what's the purpose we collect the data, to be frank. So when we asked for 48 fields for people applying for welfare, we just did some data minimization, and we actually need 8 fields. And we asked for 48. So why? It's easy to have. It's easy to have this to do control. That's the last part of the sentence, but we don't really need to know it, because we don't need to know your age, actually. We need to know, are you between 18 and 67? What's your, not what is your income, but is it below? What's your situation in your house? We don't care about other people. Are there any people in your house, and do they have an income? I mean, these are the questions, but still we ask who is it? So 48 fields, and we only need 8. So this is more or less where we are in practice, but we're now experimenting a bit less, basically. So we experimenting for, voting stuff, basically. Did you actually go there, or you live in a certain neighborhood, which is new for us, also in defining what's a citizen. Because the interesting thing about once you collect your data, you manage your own data, what do you need to do to prove that you are a citizen for us, basically? What's a neighbor? It's an interesting question. Is it when you live there 100 days a year, 200 days a year? Is it when you rent out your house, yes or no? Is it when you just visit the neighborhood every day but you don't live there? I mean, defining a neighbor is a discussion in itself, basically. So for all these things, we need to have a few of these cases, basically. And the starting point is, once we start to rethink that how the data economy is being structured and built, and we see that traditional companies, banks, but also big tech, actually play a role, that they have a business model gathering more data and do analytics, and you actually want to get rid of that and make sure we control our own data. We need new business models. But we also need a new narrative about rights, basically. So we talk a lot about privacy, etc., but the whole discussion about digital rights in this context is even more important for us as well, because as a government, this is what we do. I mean, we do legislation. I mean, we do stuff ourselves. We can give an example, but we also do legislation. So we now try to make legislation for people who have platforms for taxis, make legislation for people who rent out houses via platforms, and the data they gather. So on the one hand, we want to have data from vacation rental platforms to make sure people are not, renting out their house too much, or etc. On the other hand, when you then ask the question, would you be confident that when you go to the US that Airbnb gives all your data to the United States government as well? And then we thought, hey, this is not necessary, etc. So we really need to think, how can we make sure you control the data on these platforms as well? So maybe they don't even need to get our data, maybe they just can verify it, but are not allowed to give it away. So we really need to rethink how we cope with these platforms. So we started initiatives around Digital Rights House in Amsterdam, and several other cities being launched in the next 3 months. And we started a program around Cities for Digital Rights, because we do think that in cities you see happening what are the effects of all this data gathering around you. On the national government, you see what's happening probably as well. But when it goes wrong, there's always a place where people find out their data is being stolen, they're being the victim of algorithms that don't really work, or wrong data is being put in place, or you're hacked, or whatever in your data. The place where you see, it's always a place, always a person in a certain place where it goes wrong. So we really try to also be a help desk for them as well, and help them with their data and their data management as well. So from our perspective, I mean, I'm a really, for the last 4 or 5 years, big fan of the MyData initiative. And for us now, it's basically also the infrastructure, I would say, for a next step where we need to redefine our economy, and also redefine or define what's the city we want to be in the digital world, and how can we make sure people can move around freely, how can we make sure people can move around without discrimination. And this means we need to have digital rights in place, also giving the people the right to know who's using their data, for what, and can I actually stop it and have the right to do so. So this is a quick introduction for how we look at MyData and data in general in Amsterdam. Thank you.
Hopefully it's safe here. Thank you, Gerd, for this really interesting presentation, and basically asking those tough questions, challenging the ways how we have potentially even like legacy systems, but also legacy concepts still deployed in the ways how we operate in a city. And what I also picked up in a way was that city as a public administration is asking what kind of city do we want to be, but also the people living in that city create that city. So together, I think it's a really, really valuable question to ask and discuss together what kind of city the people themselves also like to would like to create and constantly develop, and using potentially even the same data and the different services for that.
Hand, the influence is bigger than ever because access to everything, knowledge about everything is way bigger basically. And the other side is that algorithms decide how you move through the city because your navigation system is popping you from A to B. So the interesting thing is how can you make sure you really take a stance, and I think local governments and their citizens actually need to make sure they take a stance and not let all the other things happen as well.
Yep. We do have time for 1 or 2 questions or reflections if there's anything to share. I see a hand from Will. I don't know if I can move there, otherwise.
A comment and a question. First of all, you mentioned passport being a physical evidence, but in fact, it's the only place where you have a digital identity. Yeah, it's only nicely encapsulated in plastic, but it's your digital identity given to you by the government. The question, talking about those microtransactions, that's a very interesting thing because all those identity transactions could lead to knowing much too much. But isn't it essential in self-sovereign identity is that those microtransactions don't add up by design? So I'm curious. What is your why are you a bit worried about all those microtransactions if they wouldn't add up, or do they add up?
So, two thoughts. So yeah, you're right about it, but I try to put it in history basically. But even still, I mean, the whole fact that I say that I myself I need proof from a digital thing or a paper thing still feels silly, isn't it? I mean, when I walk through the customs, hey, it's based on not on trust basically. So the whole system is about you don't trust people, you want to have this. So, and I would say that's in line with your second question. I think distrust can be a driver because all the small transactions as well. The whole idea that we're not there yet, but I expect that when I will be walking to a venue like this, nowadays you write down your name, etc., and it's for you chip in with something and it's registered your name and maybe your date of birth and your job, etc., because they need to know it basically. So the whole time when these go on, in the end they add up because there will be people combining stuff, how people move through the city as well. So by design, you should think about these things because otherwise you have a whole bunch of transactions which will add up actually. But also when you, the whole idea you don't trust people and even based on who they are or what they say, I think is for human social networks actually something we need to think about. I'm not sure if it's going the wrong way, but I don't feel very confident when somebody would ask my passport when I would walk in, not trusting me saying I'm me. So it's a bit of the whole thing that and I'm pretty sure things will start to add up when you will have, breadcrumbs throughout the city being you. And then you have a new business model for platforms to cover.
Thank you for the question. Just to check, is there also any reflections or questions from the online participants to give them a chance to also ask? Nope. Okay. Then,
so, when there are any ideas for people who think we should play a role into it, please reach out to us as well, basically, because I'm not sure we can do any project, but we can give guidance and see what we can do together as well.
Go ahead, then.
Yeah, I was curious. I think you mentioned a couple of times the creative destruction that you were calling.
I'm a big fan of Schumpeter, yeah.
I'm just curious what the kind of big tech and let's say the established companies think about. What's your recipe for like cities which are pretty much establishments calling for the creative destruction? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, a really great question. So it's. I think it's in two things. First, I thought I consider the following as a compliment. I was reached out to me, I think 6 months ago by the European Commission, and they said, "Hey, this whole smart city thing, and we don't see Amsterdam anymore. What's happening? Don't you do anything anymore?" So who told you? Yeah, IBM and Cisco. So okay, that's a good thing. Thank you. Because their business model is based on centralization and big data centers and platforms, etc. Secondly, I think what we can do, and what we already try to do, when we hand out concessions about the city for, name taxi, certification, rental platform, but also logistic companies coming up, shared mobility and all these things, Just Eat, we had just a discussion with. I think when we would allow them to do business in a city, we should also give them the rules based on what, and data gathering shouldn't be part of the business model. I mean, this is one of the reasons we got all this shared bikes, these floating bikes out of the city. It took us half a year to get legislation in place, but then we got them out in a single month, putting on trailers and trucks and sent them to Africa. Getting the technology out of it, hopefully, actually. I think otherwise we would now tracking people living in Namibia, probably. That's not a good thing. But I mean, don't allow companies who do business like that, and I think we're pretty much up there. That's a different discussion than Facebook and Google, I realize that as well. But for us, and where our, well, I would say our mandate is, people who do business in the public space in Amsterdam, actually we do have discussions with Google Maps and Waze as well on traffic. So we work with them on not sharing too much data and talk to them about these things as well. So we should take a stance about all these people, companies doing business in a city, in the government, in a country or whatever, but for us in a city, and we should come up with regulations where possible, based on digital rights.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Yes.
Yes, hi. About scaling up, I wanted to take the example of two citizens. You've got a citizen from Amsterdam who's going to move to Rotterdam or to Brussels in another country. How do you plan to work on this? And also, what about people living in a rural area? Is it also something that you're thinking about? Thank you.
Yeah, we have 3 square kilometers of rural area in a municipality, so it's not top of mind, I would say, for the last question. But for the first two things, I mean, in the end, what's always happening when you move, basically, we transfer your data partly as well from BRP to the other city as well. So we transfer part of the data when you register in another cities partly as well. So but now we do it. In the end, what you want to do, like in healthcare, we should do that as well. But you're responsible for taking your data over there actually, and maybe we can facilitate it so you can put a switch so you don't need to go with your USB or whatever. I mean, I can understand that as well. But this is via Mijn Amsterdam, actually, what we're actually now experimenting, and what we, but cities around Amsterdam, so not Rotterdam yet, but because we can't imagine why you would move to Rotterdam in that perspective. But we can imagine you can afford living in Amsterdam, so you want to live close by. So some of the few cities around us, we try to work on that as well. People explicitly give their data to another municipality. So we try to work on porting your data as well in that perspective, but it's starting, so that's a lot of work to do. And there's national regulations making us, etc.
Super.
Okay.
Well, good. Best of luck in your efforts, the different innovative pilots and efforts to make this great, valuable city happen. Thank you, Ger.
Thank you.
So, if we could also get the other slide deck available, and I will take the clicker. Then we go next to the awarding ceremony. And now it's the time to announce all of the 22 operator services that have been putting loads and loads of effort actually in the past 3 months to engage with MyData Global, but also with each other to demonstrate how do they provide the different types of tools for individuals to empower with them with their data, and really describe well how do they do it in practice. These 22 operator services provide services in more than 30 countries, but in general, actually globally, because the potential is enormous and really doesn't have or follow country borders. What I will do is show a slide with all of the logos of the operator services, and as you can see, these 22 have been awarded now with the MyData Operators 2021, and many of those operator services are joining us also online today. So all of the operator services who are joining us today, if it's possible to also open your video if it's not open already, and show yourselves. Just give a wave or something that you can indicate that you are one of the operator services joining us online. And congratulations to all of you. Hopefully here. We have also operator services who have been awarded the award joining us here today. And if I'm not mistaken, there should be at least 6 of you joining us here. And I would welcome you all on stage for a moment as well. So Marie-Jose from Schluss, Paul Janssen from Octo, Matthias from Visions, Ian from Data Yogi, and Yami or Harry, you can also both come on stage from Vastu Group. Could we give a big round of applause also to the operator services here? Oh, and Katrina as well from Miko, please come as well. Did I miss anybody else? The round of applause doesn't want to end. Thank you all for putting this huge effort in real world to make MyData happen, give individuals the right to use their data and the ways how to do it actually, not only vision-wise. I would also welcome now here Teemu Ropponen, the General Manager of MyData Global, to congratulate you. And we have prepared certificates with, for all of you. And I will help. So Visions with Matthias.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Teemu.
And Karo will also give you also a small pot of Estonian honey to give you strength in your next efforts for this.
Creative disruption.
Yes. Katrina from Miko, please give also a round of applause. Vastu Group. Marie-Jose with Schluss. Ian with Information Answers and Data Yogi. And Paul Janssen with Octo. All of the certificates will be also sent to all of the operators joining us online, so you won't be missing out from these certificates. We will send this to you, and really glad that you could also join us here today, even online. Could we also get a microphone for a moment if any one of you would like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks. There's been a lot of words about trust and being trustworthy, and for us as a more or less not new company but starting company, being trustworthy is very important. And the fact that a trustworthy organization like MyData endorses us, that's what makes us credible. So we're thankful for that.
Thank you.
For all of us.
Thank you very much.
That's a very Finnish thing to say.
I was going to say the same thing. Thank you to MyData for this work, for the trust, but also to give us the means to work together to this common interoperability. And to organize, I've said it yesterday to Sylvain and to whoever wants to listen to me, that it's a great thing to have kept this event, that all the people that could come have come, and that we can continue to tighten this community through a human layer as well, because that's what we're all about. So thank you, MyData, for all of this, and for the honey, of course.
Thank you very much. What I encourage everyone to remember those faces, pick their sleeves later during the evening, and hopefully also many of you are joining us tomorrow to still hear more about your services. What kind of use cases do you have, and really learn and engage with you, as well as the online operators joining us there. So, round of applause when we send our operators back to their seats, and then I would continue with the next steps. Thank you again for everyone. Thank you all. What I would do next is also to introduce some people who have been behind the operator thematic group and have been also engaging with those service providers, analyzing them, and really supporting those operator services to be ahead of a curve when new legislative developments are coming up, really make sure that they have also support from the community like MyData to succeed. So please give also... Okay, let's try. Okay, yes. Please give also a round of applause to Antti Joki-Poikkola, Kai Kuikkaniemi, Koen de Jong, and Josh Langford. Unfortunately, Kai and Josh are not available to join us here today in Amsterdam, but Yogi and Koen are here, so please come on stage as well. Thank you, Yogi. Also for you, for all of the work that you've been doing for the MyData operators landscape, and also Koen for you.
Should we give it back to you, because you have been actually supporting this proposal better, so don't underestimate yours.
Thank you very much, Silla, as well.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the applicants. That's really, I mean, it's huge work what the applicants have put here.
Oh, you have the microphone, sorry. Yes, that was actually my thought, that would you like to also say something for the operators joining us online or here today?
I have my presentation coming. Right?
Yogi.
Maybe you want to come.
Yeah, it's on, right? Okay. So yeah, I again really enjoyed reading all the applications and learning so much about the many differences, although I think we are all trying to achieve the same goal. It's really interesting to see how people do this in different ways, and especially also during the peer review calls, where people are so interested in learning each other's offerings and using the knowledge of others to, well, improve each other basically. So that's a great process to support, so thank you.
Thank you. So now we are, as Yogi mentioned, going to hear some further insights from the overall operator landscape, what we've learned from analyzing these operator, previously applicants and now awardees. So Yogi, please.
Okay. Do I have the clicker?
Yes.
Okay. So, operator landscape. My name is Antti Joki-Poikkola. It was said already. I've been in this panel reviewing all the applications, but I'm also currently chair of MyData Global, the board chair, so I'm involved in many other MyData activities as well, and it's super to be here. So, okay, these are not newest version, I guess, or is it? No? Somebody needs to refresh the slides. So I did my slides on the last moment. No surprises there.
That's the opening and closing session, though.
No.
I sent you the data monetization deck.
Okay, so
But can you find them?
this is
and
not
share?
the Google slide deck? Okay, meanwhile, we are looking for the slide deck. I have a task for every one of you. So you saw here the operators, and many of them are online as well. So you probably have some questions in your mind regarding what are these organizations? Where do they come from? What do they do? So think for a moment. You can write it down, because I'm gonna leave time for Q&A. That's probably most interesting here. So really, don't hesitate. There are many questions, and this is really here now to clarify what are MyData operators, because that's not a simple question. And I've got many questions around the world where I go and speak about MyData operators. So now it's also your time to ask. You saw faces and you saw logos, but you might not know much more about that. So what do you want to know about the operators? What do we know about these awarded operators? So I give some statistics, but your questions are the most important. So we have 22 operators. They are legally present. As Sille told, they offer services really widely, but they have legal presence in 13 countries. So it could be said that it's still very European phenomenon, but not uniquely European. So, and again, this representation of operators, what we have here, it's not like there could not be any other operators in the world, but this is also who we reached and who have been in the community. Most of these have been actually active over the, not just applying for the award, but being included and actively contributing to the discussions already for a longer time. So many of them are from Europe. You see the countries there. There are some from Japan, one from US, and one from Australia this year. Other statistic is that these are still small enterprises. So this personal working for the operator activities means that personal working for the operator activities. So for example, we have big companies like NTT and Fujitsu. So they are more than 50 people, I would say. But the group that is actually working for the operator activities, these are still rather small. So mostly like up to 10 people. Some are bigger, up to 50 people, but no like big enterprises in this group yet. You can contemplate and think about this. What do you want to ask from me? Take your questions. So where do they make money? What are the sources of revenue? We didn't ask in detail of everything, but you saw the picture that basically MyData operators are the intermediaries. They're facilitating the data flows according to human-centric principles between people and organizations, data sources and data users. So they could charge for the data using service that the service pays, or they could charge for the data sources that the data sources pay, or they could charge the individuals so that I pay for these services, or there could be somebody else who just wants to see this kind of data sharing happening in the world and subsidize this infrastructure, even if they are not one of these parties. Like we heard, maybe City of Amsterdam wishes to subsidize this one day. City of Helsinki is actually already doing that. So there could be other organizations that are not directly involved in the data exchange, but they want it to happen. And then there are some like other category, which is many things. So it can be seen that subsidizing customers, so somebody who sees the need for this kind of data sharing infrastructure to be there, but is not directly participating in the exchanges, that's the most typical source of revenue for today's MyData operators. Then we saw the image of these 9 functional elements that operators may implement or not. So it's not required that to be MyData operator you have to tick box on all of the 9. How did we actually assess this? We asked each and every operator to rate from 1 to 5 how important is this particular, or 0 to 5 I guess. How important is this particular area? So is identity management super important or a little bit important, or for all of those? And here we see that They are quite, I think, personal data transfer, identity are the most, but it's getting up there that many of the operators are building capabilities for these different areas. Maybe value exchange and service management are a little bit lagging behind or not in the portfolio of all of the operators, but compared to last year, this is leveling up. So more of the operators are doing more of the areas. And then we had this one section of the survey this year was very particular for Europe, because there is new legislation called Data Governance Act coming up. So it should be finalized by the end of this year and then put into enforced early next year, which actually creates this, it talks about data intermediaries not only for personal data, but quite importantly for personal data intermediaries, and it sets certain requirements that if you are this kind of trusted intermediaries, you need to do this and that. So it's a big thing that I think it's the first like hard regulation of this type. Well, there are some similarities in some other countries, and then there are some soft regulation like the Japanese information bank scheme, for example. So this is coming up, and we asked from those of the operators who are looking forward to have business in Europe and would fall under this regulation on how would they fill the envisioned requirements. And we did this to assess, first of all, to kind of understand if there are some requirements that are super hard to put in place or bad in some other ways, so that we could still pass the message because it's not finalized. But the outcome was that no, it's like okay, the requirements, but they are really hard to understand. That's what came out. That reading the law and thinking whether we actually will or how are we going to comply with this, it's a hard thing. And I think this is, of course, there is operators outside of Europe. Not everybody is going to do business in Europe, but also for those who are not, it's probably wise to follow the more or less same requirements. And I think this is also the community to collectively understand what they mean and what should be the response for it. We are not going to publish the individual answers to the Data Governance Act questions because it's so new, but we are doing a kind of collective analysis of the results, and they are coming soon. So those are the things that I could very quickly over a couple of days to just extract on like aggregate level from the applications. I have lots of thoughts on individual applications, but I don't want to be unfair and pick some favorite operators or anything like that. But it's obvious that things are moving. This is not, we didn't get more operators this year, actually few less than last year, but the quality of applications, I think it went generally up, and many of the operators are moving, and I saw this kind of understanding of the common language is becoming better. Some even just said that they decided to sort of ditch their own vocabulary and adopt the MyData way of describing things, because they thought that, okay, we used to use this word, but now we could equally use this other word. And kind of this kind of harmonization from bottom up starts to happen. But now going back to your questions. So what do we know and what do we want to know about the operators? I think we have a couple of minutes, so I wish to get many good and hard questions. Who is the first one? Can be also from online audience. Who is reading out if somebody chats there? Okay. Questions? Come on, you want to know something?
Octo, I have one question about the group other kind of revenues. Can you elaborate a little bit on that one?
It was varied. There was, for example, something that we couldn't actually consider revenue if it's, for example, grant from public source. So it's kind of investment to build it, and that kind of revenue sources. I think that was the most common in the other category to be noted that there is some sort of development grant.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe then a question to any of the operators that wants to answer. Many of the operators were still micro enterprises or small enterprises. So a question would be to any operator, how big do you think you have to be to become sustainable?
I can try to answer for Octo then. I think we need 50 people.
50 people.
So we are about 40 at the moment. And I think we need another year to grow to kind of maximum. And then I think the platform is fully sustainable. And then we can, invest in new stuff, but also keep the old stuff working. So I think we need about 50, yeah.
There was a question from online.
Thanks. Yeah, 2 questions online. The first is, have any of the operators published their revenue figures? And the second question was, have there been any difficulties in working with other operators?
First question, I don't think that the operator organizations are any different from any other companies. We didn't ask for the revenue figures, and I think companies do publish if they are public companies, and if they are privately owned, they might not publish. So I think there is no particular difference between operators and other companies. So we didn't look for the revenue figures. And what was the other question?
The other question was, were there any challenges in working with operators?
You mean from MyData Global with the operators, or operators?
I think within the operator group. So
yeah.
it's really a question for operators, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably a question for the operators, but like observing it from the operator group, I think the big challenge is really still on coming into the terms of the common understanding and common language. What we did this year was that we have this reference model, the 9 areas. So we had workshops from each one of these areas, and we had really good participation. Many of these awarded operators were involved to kind of banging heads together and trying to understand what it actually means when we speak about, let's say, service management or identity management. And these discussions were very intense in a way, hard, and that's also something that I want to thank all the operators to kind of having the persistence to try to understand each other. So that's the big challenge, and something I can publicly announce is that the outcomes of that work, we are going to republish the white paper just with the new reference model, so more details on those, and of course then in the 2020 published paper there was only this proto-operator, somebody that we thought that might be MyData operator, so we will of course replace that with the actual operators. So that will be coming up by early next year. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge in collaboration is really the language at this stage.
The mic is here, just a second.
Okay. Do you have any idea about the verticals that are involved in operators, the different industries?
Yeah. So we did ask like tick box question on which of the verticals, whether you are in business of health or finance or so forth. Unfortunately, my spreadsheet capabilities ran out, plus time ran out, so I couldn't get this figure. It was just because there was lots of data, and I didn't figure out how to do it. I didn't have time to do it manually, and my automation skills fell short, so it's not here. But we asked it, and Generally, well, there are some big areas. I can easily say that finance is big one, health is big one, cities is becoming big one. I think those are, but these have been already for a long time. And then there are some up-runners, but I will do the analysis and show the figures later on.
Yeah, still on the question about interoperability and working together. It's about understanding each other's language, of course, but carefully we are also cooperating with other initiatives here in the Netherlands to see if we can work towards technically making interoperability work as well. Because I think as operators we need to cooperate at this moment to make the whole system work. So it's starting to cooperate very carefully, very small, but cooperation is starting.
I see some eye blinking from Sille, so what's the time?
We should start wrapping up this section, as we had still the possibility to talk with 3 operator services and potentially even ask those some questions then directly from the operator services. So thank you, Yogi, for this. And yeah, all of those insights. The operators meet regularly in MyData Global Slack as well as in online workshops. So if you'd like to learn more, definitely do join operator Slack channel and yeah, discuss further. But let's take the clicker. There we go. So the last, but definitely not least, section of this awarding session is the fireside chats with 3 operator services, and we picked them because they are from 3 different continents. So Fujitsu Limited with Personium service joining us online from Japan, Dixon. Then Katrina, Miko here on site today, and Sterling from Self Innovations from the US joining again online. But to talk with them, we've asked Peter Olsson to join us, who is an investigative journalist here in Netherlands. And please welcome on stage Peter, who will then also introduce all of the operator services more in depth. So please. And
thank you. Thank you all today for having me here. It's a very inspiring community, maybe even the most inspiring community I've been in, and not private, of course, but for business. Many interesting talks, and people have many ideas here. We ran out of time, and that means that this whole bunch and list of questions I'm not going through. I think what I heard, people are very interested in the last subject, is how to reach a market, how to become mature. And I tried to elaborate with 3 parties here on that main subject. How do they think they will reach a market and become mature, and what they think about partnering, for example. Dixon, it's you. Can we hear you as well? I see you now. Can you, yeah? Okay. You're in Japan now with Personium. What I read is that it's the first and still the only open source personal data store platform in Japan, and created by Fujitsu, and it's developed for both common users and enterprises. And of course, Fujitsu we know already for many years as one of the main, may I say, IT companies. Can we? Yes, there is back. Can you tell me about him? Is it easier for you than for him? We talk here about very, or not very, but rather small companies. Is it easier for you with a huge company behind you to reach a market? And how do you interact with Fujitsu? How important is it for you? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, it's kind of both yes and no, because with Fujitsu, then they kind of like pay my salary so that I can drive the Personium community, and then also they pay my salary to participate in this MyData community. But again, it's so huge that every business unit is just competing with each other. So even though we are kind of like getting friendly association or collaborations from the MyData operators in the world, but then within Fujitsu, we are not welcome sometimes because they have their own other products. So each other's, we just getting at our folds. So it's very hard to persuade the other company, the other business unit to drop their solutions and then just use Persona. And the only good thing is like we're open source, so we don't have to have this binding problem. So I would say we're kind of good with Fujitsu backing us up and with all the connections and everything. And the trustworthiness also, because it's so huge that I would say most people would trust using Fujitsu product. That's all. Okay, get back to you.
Thank you very much for your clear answer. The next question is, how many people are using your service and which organizations do you connect?
Yeah, it's hard to say because back in the 2011, when we have the big earthquake, we already have the service to provide for the refugees to take care of their pets, but then it's usually just short-term services and then some POCs for a company that they want to explore the idea of the idea of sharing personal data. So I would say mostly, at the most, we have sometimes 500 users, and then sometimes it's 500 different clinics that connect together to share their data for the pets or patients. And currently, it's kind of dropped down to just POCs with some municipality or some organization, but we are not allowed to say. And then some, also we have a big contract with the Japanese data bank platformer, and we're providing the platform for them so that they can resell it as a sandbox or something. And that's kind of confidential, so I'm not allowed to say. So sorry about that. That's all.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. Dixon, thank you very, very much for your contribution here, and we enjoy. Shouldn't you be asleep right now or go to bed?
Yes, it's. I kind of like this week is my Amsterdam time zone, so it's okay.
Okay. So thank you even more for your contribution. Thank you very much and have a successful... Next one is not a sleepy. Katrina, can you please come over and answer some questions? We know Amico as one of the most important players in the world in this field, already developing since 2012. First in the fintech sector in Australia, then coming to Europe, to Brussels, I guess? Yes. No? Okay. Yeah. So we don't need too much introduction. I heard you say this morning already, very important. Sorry. I'm too big. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Stand on this table. Okay, I heard you talking about the market. You want to reach the market. You are reaching the market already with a bank also, the biggest Belgian bank, KBC, as far as I know. Can you tell me how do you develop a market and a business model together with this bank?
Okay. Oh, I think no. I'm using this. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I was mic'd up, but did I do something? No. Okay.
And I'm also reading the mind, thank you. So I think a few things. I think there is reaching the market and there's also market making. And I think one of the things for many people in the room, and also if we go right back to the beginning or the roots of the MyData white paper, it was an idea, it was a vision. And if you look at how many markets emerged or were created, you know, they started with a concept or an idea. And when we first read that paper translated into English, I think it was within weeks that I was over in Helsinki thinking, okay, someone else is seeing this, yeah? And then I think, so part of it is that cooperative process of how you engage, which is part of market making. Another part of market making is this product market fit. And for me, I had come from financial services background, so it was natural to understand many of the opportunities in that sector. And as you said, KBC is not only the biggest bank in Belgium, but it is just recently won again the most trusted brand in Belgium, not bank, but also the best app in the world, the best banking app in the world. So it's a big privilege for us to be part of that infrastructure. But like any move to a new market, it is always starts with the customer. Customer wakes up in the morning, you and I, there's a job that we need to do, there is someone we need to trust, there is something that needs to happen as an outcome, and who is there to help. And that's our whole philosophy is start with the individual, and then what is the mutual value that can be created through that process. And I think for KBC, they've just been at the forefront of recognising this idea of providing that service to customers is a big part of reinforcing that trust.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think you will stand in, let's say, 3-4 years from now?
3 or 4 years, I think what we did differently in this last 18 months that COVID forced was that we realised that we couldn't be necessarily in the room with people working things out and working on use cases. So we turned our attention to modularising our tech stack, creating a developer portal, and then understanding that there were probably 3 groups. There were large enterprises, there were SMEs that maybe were trying to look at how they could incorporate something in an existing capability, and then there were startups that wanted to build and have that framework right out of the box. And so I think what we can already see based on this last year is those different sectors growing, and also what I see is things like open banking, data regulation, for instance in Australia the consumer data right, starting to accelerate different sectors, often starting in financial services, moving to telecommunications and utilities. So I see in the next few years some of these industry sectors aligning to create more ecosystems, and I think that's going to be the big shift into these mutual ecosystems, and which could include startups using the same underlying technology as a large enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Now, this biggest bank of Belgium and most trusted bank has a lot of big, huge databases with customer data. I don't think they want to get rid of their customer data. How do you look upon that?
So first of all, I think the strategy for any organisation, and it's certainly not my place to speak on behalf of the bank or in fact any of our customers, I think our philosophy is and, not or. So our guiding mission is to enable everyone in the planet to get equity and value for the data they exchange. And that means you and I, but it also may mean a service provider, an organisation. So there is contextual reasons, or there is regulatory reasons, particularly for a bank, that requires them to hold data to be able to perform the duties that they perform and that they're regulated. The difference is this and, saying there is also the opportunity for customers to have a safe space. The bank doesn't have access to the data, we don't have access to the data. It's something that only the customer has full control of, which then takes you into this collaboration. Again, it's the and, okay? The bank may have a lot of information using the systems that are legitimately collecting that data, but what does that look like when you put it together with data that may have come, if it's either volunteered or verified from other sources? What's the power of that collaboration?
And I think that's the big shift. It's not one for the other, it's this magic of the and.
Okay, that's very, very interesting. Thank you very much,
Thank
Katrina,
you.
and for coming here and arriving here. We're now moving to the United States.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would say your votes, please, but we are first turning to the two states. When someone got up fairly early, I guess. No? Yeah. I should ask, are you woke? But that's not a good question, maybe. I'm sorry. We will be talking with, and I hope I pronounce your name good. You're CEO of Self Innovations. Signet, is that your first name? Signet Sterling? He's embarrassed, I'm sorry. It's my mistake. Yeah? Hello, your microphone. Or talk with your hands.
There we go. I
Yeah,
kept unmuting.
thank you very much.
Yeah, so my name is R. Sterling Sneed. Yes, my first name is just the letter R. And it is very confusing for people.
Okay. Thank you very much for getting up so early. And,
no problem. Happy to be
yeah.
here.
Your company has become a member of MyData. Why? Why is it so important for you, for an American company, to be a member of this worldwide organization?
I think it's helpful for me because MyData is trying to set international standardizations, terminology of interoperability, and it is difficult explaining to people in the United States what in multiple countries, the United States, Europe, Africa, and so explaining that we are of the highest standards according to a European organization for GDPR, DGA, but also human centricity and ethics helps give a better reputation, but also a major part of it for me was just education. Learning from all of the members of MyData has been extremely helpful and wonderful.
Mm-hmm. You're now, your current project is SelfPath, and it is used in the COVID crisis. How many people are using it, and how are they using it?
So I can't say the numbers exactly because we have actually used the backend framework in other applications as well for human protection in dangerous areas, and that's under NDA. But the most interesting application has been in Africa or other areas because vaccine passports don't work in countries where they can't have access to vaccinations. So what happened is we were developing basically a comprehensive personal health record. Then the pandemic hit and we said we needed to build a multivariable health passport. So we set up a scientific research institute, worked with an epidemiology clinic out of Hungary, and said, okay, how can we build medical logic and then translate that into a usable health passport app that's adaptable and flexible in multiple countries. And the countries where they didn't have access to the vaccines were obviously most interested at first. And explaining it in the United States, I mean, I think everyone gets news about what's going on in the United States. It's a lot of fractionalization mess there.
Oh yeah? And what a nice country. Talking about this nice country and big tech, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, where do you think consumers and companies are heading in terms of using personal data? And will big tech enter this arena?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think big tech has already entered this arena. It's us that's new. They've entered into, they were using personal data ages ago. I mean, even back in 2019, there's a famous quote from Sean Parker, the first, president of Facebook that said privacy is the new celebrity, but privacy is not necessarily data access or data transparency. One of my friends was the co-chairman for Deloitte Center for the Edge for a long time, and he wrote a book back in 1999 called Net Worth that talked about intermediaries. So I think big tech has known that this is coming for a long time, but especially organizations like mine and all the other operators that are coming and saying we want to our data, to use it to empower individuals and better our own lives, is really the new entry into the arena.
Mm-hmm. Can Facebook save itself by giving data to the users and get rid of all those big
that's a good question.
databases?
I don't know if I can speak on behalf of Facebook, but I have a lot of connections into Silicon Valley. I've invested in tech. I mean, in 2017, there was a company that to us, one of my investing firm, they could basically scrape public social media and predict your credit score within 20 points. Is that this data can be used for lots of different things. I think Facebook has the problem that they built just so quickly. They weren't trying to build something bad in the beginning. They were just trying to build and innovate quickly. And we tried to learn from that mistake, which is why we set up two entities. We set up a benefit corporation that's getting a B Corp status, because in the United States, a lot of people won't take you seriously if you're a nonprofit. But we also set up a nonprofit for scientific research for human data. And basically that publishes the data to the public, and then the benefit corporation builds the innovations, because you have to have informed development. Land in trouble.
Yeah. Do you know that, that's the last question, that already about 12 years ago, within Google, a personal data market was developed as an auction where data was given to the users, to the people, and they could auction their data with digital companies. What do you think about monetization and auction model for personal data?
I think as long as there's the responsibility of the person or entity or organization to educate the users on what they're doing with it. There was a really great experiment at Berkeley University where a coffee shop was set up and students could basically sell their data for a cup of coffee or a bagel, but they didn't know where the data went or what happened to it or what it was used for. So, you know, you think about use cases. What happens if you have an elderly person who's not very tech savvy, or a person who has special needs with limited capacity? It's upon the operator, the owner of the organization, to have some form of for the people about what selling their data really means. Technology is a tool, like the difference between a handsaw or a chainsaw. You can do a lot of self-damage with a chainsaw, so you have to make sure that people have proper training and there's proper guards in place.
Mm-hmm. May I thank you very, very much for your contribution here. It was very useful. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think this is nearly the end. They asked me to sing, which I will do now for 1.5 hours. The door will be oh no, sorry.
Thank you, Peter, for chatting with operators. Some Finnish chocolate also for you too, for the Christmas part or Christmas that is coming up soon. Hopefully, this was also interesting Thank you, Peter. And this is it for the awarding session of MyData Operators 2021. Last slides to show before we move, hopefully, to some social programs, some more chats with each other. As was mentioned already before by Yogi, also we publish the applications of operator services. And if you'd like to learn more about certain questions that we've asked, how do they really provide the services for these different functional elements, then you will have the chance for it through the application platform, actually through this link. Don't need to remember right away, this will also be added to our website. So MyData operators from the MyData website will be your key resource for that. But before we close, some final resources to leave with you. The MyData Declaration is the key cornerstone for the whole community and also the operators to describe how do they really try to bring the declaration to life. The MyData operators website, the different papers that we published, but also the white paper on MyData operators, the Slack, and also the forum for joining us as a member, either as an individual or organization. And if this has been interesting to you, and actually you might actually provide operator services your own, then there will be a new application round coming up next year, starting from January. We will share the news also already later this year, how and where you can apply. So there will be more awards given out, and hopefully many more operator services joining us in this community. So congratulations again to all of the awardees of 2021 joining us online or here in Amsterdam. And I think this is it for today. Let's give a final round of applause.